You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and it's time for this week's Long Island News, the show that talks to newsmakers and other important people from Nassau and Suffolk County that matter to Long Island, and Long Islanders like you. So each week we'll have a conversation about issues that affect all of us. I live on Long Island just like you, and I want to know more about where my tax dollars are going, and I want to know more about the people making the big decisions that affect all of us. Well, this week I'm very happy to welcome back to our show Ms. Laura Curran. And last time she was on our show, it was December 2021. She was just about to leave the office as the Nassau County Executive, and a lot has happened since then. Can't wait to catch up. So hello, Laura. How are you?
I'm wonderful. It's so nice to be back with you.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, wow.
It's been a minute.
Yeah, really has.
Yeah.
You seem more relaxed to me, although you did not seem anything but that when you were county executive. You were always you face the day. Whatever is you got to take care of, you take care of, and you do your best. So what have you been up to?
I have been very busy. I'm actually having fun going back to my roots in journalism. So I have a background in print journalism. I was a reporter at the Daily News and the New York Post previous to politics. And now I'm kind of synthesizing my time in government and in politics with my journalism. And I've got a podcast I started in June. It's called Cut to the Chase with Laura Curran. And that's kind of morphed now also into a radio show at WABC. So at 4 o'clock on Sundays, I have a radio show also called Cut to the Chase with Laura Curran, where I talk what you do, current events, what's going on in our country, what's going on in the state, in the city, on Long Island, talk to newsmakers, talk to reporters, just to delve a little deeper into the news and what's going on. And it's a lot of fun. I'm meeting a lot of people. I'm learning a lot. Radio, as you know, is a whole different world. And doing a podcast is one thing, but doing a radio show where you got to hit your marks, you have to be on time, you can't record over what you just said. It's out there in the world. You know, that's a really fun new thing for me to be learning.
Right. Do they turn those shows into podcasts?
Yeah. Then they go wherever you get your podcasts.
Right.
Apple,
right.
Spotify. So it all goes into the same place.
And that's, you think about that. That's daunting. Everything you've ever said on the radio is
right.
somewhere.
It's somewhere.
It's someplace,
Right. And I always think if I ever run for office again, someone's going to have some poor staffer on the campaign is going to have to listen to hundreds of hours of me yammering on to pick out like some embarrassing thing I said. Yeah.
Right. To find the soundbite.
Yeah. So I feel sorry for that person.
It's New York City, so you're not just covering Nassau anymore.
Right. I do it all. So my very first podcast was with an author. His name is Gus Garcia Roberts. He wrote a book about Jimmy Burke, the chief of police in Suffolk, who was arrested and went to jail, James Burke. Yeah. It's called Jimmy the King, the book. So that was my very first one. So that was very Long Island centric. But just yesterday, for my podcast, I interviewed Keechant Sewell, who is the police commissioner for New York City, who actually I worked with in Nassau. We were in Nassau together.
Right.
So, it runs the gamut. I've spoken with Kellyanne Conway and, just all kinds of people. It's a lot of fun.
Wow. It's interesting that you've worked with some of the people that you're actually going to talk to. So
right.
You've had a peek behind the curtain.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
In a sense.
You know how the sausage is made.
Yeah, well, and of course, the next question that comes up, let's talk about the last 16 months since you left office.
Okay.
And now, of course, Republican Bruce Blakeman was elected. What's your opinion of how things are going in Nassau County? And they want to know what grade you would give Mr. Blakeman.
Oh, well, I won't be so presumptuous as to give him a grade. And, perhaps I'm too close to the situation to be objective, but, I live in Nassau County and I am rooting for Nassau County's success. So I'll just leave it there.
Good way to look at it. Good.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what's one of the issues that as a county executive gets in and takes office that nobody wants to deal with? Or has not been dealt with. Let's put it that way.
I think the most difficult part of the job is dealing with assessment, property assessment. I don't want to put your listeners to sleep because it can be a very boring and dry topic, but it's very challenging and it's very difficult. In other counties, it's the towns that handle the property assessment. Nassau County is actually, there's 2 counties of all 62 counties in New York State. Nassau County and one tiny little one upstate are the only ones where the county actually does it. And that's part of the reason why there's such a big problem with it. Right. It really should be left to the towns. But politically, to get that done, it's going to take Albany to get it. I can't imagine politically that is ever going to be possible, but it would be the best outcome.
Right. So it didn't start with the towns then.
No. Well, there's a sort of a murky history, but it appears that, sometime in the 30s or 40s, everyone got together and decided, let's give it to the county. We don't want to deal with this crap.
Right. So that was their answer, but the county can't hand it off to anybody.
No, unless they want it, and then you got to have the Albany lawmakers actually vote it through. And that happening, I think, is, help will probably freeze over first.
Yeah, right. Newsday reported this week that Nassau County failed to apply $139 million in assessed valuation on 624 homes. Wow, that's a lot for 620. Well, maybe it's not. For the new tax year that begins in the fall. In the Newsday article, of course, Mr. Blakeman blames your administration for the error because he says it was in 2023, 2024 values that were calculated before you left office.
Well, I think that's sort of typical of what politicians do. Just blame the guy who came before you for whatever it is.
That's what I thought when I read it. I was like,
that's sort of standard.
And thank God you have a predecessor that
Thank God you had a predecessor.
That can't speak now.
Right. And I'm not going to enter into the fray because, what am I going to do that for?
Yeah. Oh, last week you were featured on Fox News, of all places, talking on the topic of New Yorkers leaving the state because they don't believe leaders want to make things better or because of the high cost of living here. I mean, I don't think there's any news there, but
no, that day that I was on Fox and Friends, there was a front page story on the Post, or maybe it was the day before, saying that a record number of people are leaving New York and going to Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always been that New York-Florida pipeline. Didn't everybody's grandparents move to Florida
when we were young? I've lived here a long time, and it's always been a record. Every year it's a record.
But it seems like it's more now. And what they do is they look at the driver's license. People who come and change over from New York driver's license. That's how they do it.
Right.
But we are seeing people leave, and it is a concern because when people leave, they take their tax dollars with them. I'm concerned about businesses leaving. So I'm always very focused on creating a very business-friendly environment, keeping it as safe as possible, and being responsible with taxes.
Right. Well, I've talked to a couple of lawmakers about industrial development agencies.
Yeah.
And I really talk more about the optics. Because I really don't know how the machinations work, But I see a new company coming into Long Island, and the people that read this in the paper say they're going to give them $500 million in tax breaks, and they're going to do this and do that. This company's loaded. Why don't I get some of that?
Yes, I hear you. Now, I will say about IDA, so these are industrial development agencies, and they're sort of quasi-governmental, and they're meant to create economic development. And it's a very competitive climate. Businesses can go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I think if done well, done properly, IDAs can be very effective. They're given also these tax breaks for builders to build housing. If you build more affordable housing, there's more of a tax abatement. But you have to prove that there is a return on that investment. The taxpayers are basically investing in your business, in your development, whatever it is. You have to prove you're creating X amount of jobs, that you're going to create X amount of units, housing units, or whatever it may be, for it to be worthwhile. So it's an investment that the community will then get something out of.
Right.
And then if it turns around, the jobs promised weren't created, there should be a mechanism to get that money back.
Yeah, right.
But it is a competitive environment. It's cheaper to do business in other places. So I think done strategically and done well, these can be very effective.
Yeah.
When I was in office, we worked very closely with the IDA and we had some good success.
I mean, the big one was the Amazon. When Amazon wanted to move into, I guess it was Long Island City.
It was Long Island City.
Yeah. And they were talking about $1 billion. And to the reading, and I got to say, when it comes to finances and stuff, uneducated public, that's a smack in the face.
Yeah.
It may only be optics.
If I recall, it was a $27 billion benefit with a tax abatement of $3 billion. I'm a little fuzzy on that, but the net is so much better. And if the jobs created, I was very, very disappointed when that Amazon deal fell through.
Oh, were you?
I was.
Yeah.
I was. I thought it would be, and being selfish for Nassau County, we would have gotten a lot of that spillover. We would have gotten, people coming to move here. We could have had ancillary businesses come here. It would have been very good for us, good for our economic ecosystem. But alas, we just got to move on because it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. There were so many things. They settled the Fox News Dominion case for $780 $87 million.
That's about half of what they were discussing at the beginning of that conversation.
Yeah.
$1.6 billion. Yeah, that's big news.
Did you see that coming?
I felt because it was delayed, that the opening of the trial was delayed.
Whoa.
And that made me think, I bet they're negotiating some kind of settlement here. And alas, they were.
So what do they gain by, I guess they don't get, what could you say, outed in court?
I think so. It would have been a long, protracted thing. It's funny because I was listening to Alan Dershowitz on another station saying that this is a disaster. This is terrible for the First Amendment. But I got to imagine Fox did not want to cart out their talent. Mm-hmm. People like Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham with those texts saying that this is absurd. Who believes this crap? And then you know how attention spans are these days. Next week, everyone's going to have forgotten this. It'll be old news.
The news cycle. Yeah.
Whereas if it was a trial and it was dragging on, it just would have gone on forever. And then the appeal, depending on how it went. Go.
You are listening to this week's Long Island News on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and my guest today is former Nassau County Executive Laura Curran, who is now the host of a new podcast and a radio show on 770 WABC called Cut to the Chase.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I have to learn to do with my radio show. You got to remind people who you're talking to, what you're talking about, what you're listening to.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah, it is.
Because people tune in and out.
But I like the idea of the half-hour podcast, though. That's short and sweet. You're in, you're out, you found out what you needed to know. And
people like it. It gives them, it coincides with the commute or walking the dog or whatever it is they're doing when they're listening to their podcast.
Yeah. I was always excited by the idea that long-form conversation actually is making a comeback. Mm-hmm. And if you look at all the podcasts, some of them are 2 and 3 hours long.
Yeah. I
don't know if I can make a commitment like that. It's like, smoking a cigarette or a cigar. Smoking a cigar, you're in for the,
you're in for the long haul.
You can have a quick cigarette and run. But because I think of the old days where like the debates that they had in politics during Lincoln's time, they talk for 3 hours, break for lunch, and come back and talk for another 3 or 4. And people sat there and listened.
People were riveted.
Yeah. I don't see that in certainly our society.
Well, everyone would be whipping out their phones.
If it's not a meme or a soundbite, we're not interested.
That's right. That's right. And people had to formulate really strong arguments. They had to articulate them using logic and using proper sequence. Mm-hmm. And that's an art.
Oh.
Not easy.
That would cost you a lot of money today in college to learn how to do that, right?
That's right.
So what do you think is going on with Long Island? Like we say, they're worried about people leaving. But that's kind of been the MO for a long time.
Yeah.
Make your money in New York and spend it somewhere else.
Yeah.
It kind of seems to work for Long Island because as many people as we get rid of that fly south and do whatever, the replacements will be right there. The only thing I see is that as the years go by, the affluence of the people that come in and are able to function, it's got to keep going up.
It was interesting during COVID, we had a lot of people of means move to Nassau County and also out in Suffolk.
When the property values went and were a little shaky there, some people, they were buying houses left and right. I know on the North Shore.
And then folks in the city wanted to move here. They wanted the space. And so we saw there were a lot of those big homes that had been languishing for sale on the North Shore for a long time. And they were all getting snatched up. Now, of course, it was very volatile. Prices went up really quickly. That's kind of calmed down a little bit. I think that the market's stabilized a bit. Now with interest rates going up, that's going to change what happens as well. I think, we should talk about housing a little bit. I am a big fan of more housing. I am a big fan of transit-oriented development, where walkable downtowns. Mm-hmm. And I see, the Governor Hochul has come up with this plan. I don't know, it's being debated now with the budget, so I don't know how it's going to end up.
Right.
But I felt a little frustrated because as a big fan of more housing, more affordable housing, transit-oriented development, I thought she went about it in a very clumsy way. Mm-hmm. And if anyone had asked my advice, I would have said overriding local zoning is politically really difficult and really bad here on Long Island. But it's not just the political aspect. I had an op-ed actually in Newsday when this thing came out, that structurally, that kind of density around our train stations that her plan would impose, the zoning that it would allow, a lot of it's not sustainable. A lot of our downtowns are built on marshland, or they may not be sewered like up in the North Shore. There are real issues. We have to make sure that when you draw a lot of water out of our aquifer, that's the only place we get our drinking water. If you have too much density, you draw too much up too quickly, you get salt water intruding in it, making it less or undrinkable. So I see that she saw there was a problem and wanted to fix it. And I appreciate that because it is a problem.
Yeah.
It's not affordable for a lot of people. And I'm sure a lot of the students, when they graduate, they're starting out in their careers. Where can they live? They have to double up or triple up or move or live in the basement of their parents' home.
Yep.
That's not ideal. So, but there are better ways to go about it. Work with the mayors, work with the civic groups. You can get it done. We've had some good success on Long Island. Build on that success instead of trying to impose something from Albany.
I think that was the first complaint is that, towns and people out here said, why aren't we deciding what happens
People
here?
like local control.
But they can say that, but then when it comes time to, okay, what's your plan? And nobody comes up with anything.
But I've always, especially when I was county exec, I always wanted to uphold those courageous mayors and other folks. I'm thinking of Lynbrook. I'm thinking of Mineola. I'm thinking of Farmingdale, Patchogue. There's all these places where there's been great development. Yeah. And take Farmingdale. That is now a vibrant downtown.
I have a question for you, though.
Yeah.
If most of the downtown is rooted or its base is restaurants and bars, there aren't many other businesses, and that's it. Does that have a boom and then a bust?
Well, everything comes and goes. Ideally, you have diverse kinds of businesses, the florist, the dry cleaner, the tutoring place, the boutique, whatever it is. You want to have bars and restaurants are great, good jobs. People spend their money, people come. It's good, creates a good sense of place. But you want to have a nice amount of different kinds of businesses as well.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. Well, the latest in Farmingdale is that they're putting in meters. And the residents are not thrilled.
Well, nobody likes meters.
What I can see on social media, they're not thrilled.
Yeah.
But, it gets sticky. The guy that's just going in to pick up dinner for the night, he's still got to pay the parking meter, even though he's leaving 40 minutes on the clock, those kinds of things.
Yeah, but parking's been an issue. And I think we can trust the local elected officials who are, ostensibly represent the residents to do what they want, to do what they think is best. And they've got to solve problems. Sometimes it's not always 100% popular, but they've got to come up with the best solution. And I know parking has been a big issue in Farmingdale. Yeah. As it is in a lot of places. Rockville Center, same thing.
Well, and sometimes they're a little upset with the signage that they really didn't understand that, no, this means you, not here, kind of thing, The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was New York State's got the new cannabis laws and all this. But from what I understand, and I thought about this when it first happened. A guy's walking down the street and he's smoking something. So my question to him is, okay, where'd you get it? Because there's only 3 licenses for legal marijuana in the state.
Yeah. I think it might be up to 5 or 6 now. But think of that in a state of 18 million people.
But the issue is here is that there's a window. And as far as the police department is concerned, it's illegal.
Well, it's decriminalized.
No. I'm talking about the sale and buying.
Oh, the sale.
Is illegal. So technically, anybody smoking it has most likely bought it someplace that's not sanctioned by the state.
Well, but they are allowed to have it and they're allowed to smoke it.
Right.
I have to say, I've been really disappointed with the rollout of this cannabis legalization. So what is done? So you've decriminalized, okay. But you haven't given out the licenses for people to sell it legally. So what you have is a situation in New York City, for instance, where there are 14 to 1,500 illegal cannabis shops. That's 6 times as many Starbucks as there are. Think about that. And you don't know what you're getting. And they've done they looked at it. They've, maybe there's mold or E. coli or whatever. You don't know what you're getting. Whereas if it's a licensed, regulated shop, you know what you're getting. It's I would say a better product, but also a safer product. Yeah,
I guess, yeah. You do have to keep in mind that underground business has been on Long Island for 100 years.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't really heard any mass die-offs from people who've...
No, that's true.
So I understand that as a way to sell more of your product.
Yeah.
I don't mean you, but the state. Oh, ours is safer. Okay. Well, we've been here for 100 years, and this stuff has never proved to be unsafe. So
that's true. But one concern I do have is that since you have all of these illegal places that are operating in broad daylight, when the legit places finally get their license and can operate, are they going to be able to compete? Because they've got to pay the taxes. Remember, they've got to, when you're regulated and taxed, it increases your price of doing business. So.
I remember you and I having the conversation because the Governor Cuomo at the time was deciding what an ounce of pot was going to go for.
Yeah.
And I just, first of all, what does he know about it? Secondly, does he know that he could price the state out of the market?
Yeah. That's what happened in California. They saw their illicit market really just take over.
Right.
Because it's cheaper.
It's a good governor, because there is a free market. Well, there really isn't, but there is. And there should be something that tamps down because everybody's just looking at the tax revenue but for Long Island, most of the towns opted out.
Yeah, most of them did.
Yeah. From a governing point of view, to me, that's smart. I mean, Bill didn't like it, but it's smart because if you've opted in, you can't opt out. But if you opt out, you can always opt in at a later. So now you can see, how's my neighbor doing? Oh my goodness, he made $10 million last week. Maybe we should opt in. I think that's what most are hoping for. I don't know why they couldn't take the numbers from a place like Colorado or whatever and just see how well they did for a year. And also, what were the costs of administering it and the police costs?
Right, the police costs, and also something that concerned me is that we're very much a car culture here on Long Island, and we really don't have the equivalent of a breathalyzer for alcohol. There's really no way to test how high you are.
We talked about that. I talked about it.
That's something that does concern me.
Patrick Ryder, you know Patrick, Mr. Ryder. It's one of the things he said was very interesting because I asked him, when you go out, maybe walking to the park or whatever, with your family on a weekend, do you see anything? And he said, no, I don't really see any difference. I don't smell anything. He said, but I'll tell you when I do smell it, the minute I get on the parkway.
Yeah.
I open my window and somebody's...
For some reason, the southern state is very attractive to marijuana smokers.
Yeah, well, I just said oddly, that's the one place you're not allowed to do it. Or you shouldn't be doing it.
I know.
And that's, So
that does concern me.
Yeah. Well, I know down in Georgia, what they did was created 10 drug officers. They put them through some kind of training. I don't know how scientific...
Yeah, we have that in Nassau County as well.
Do we?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know how scientific it is.
Yep.
But I would like to see the scientific... You have a breathalyzer.
That's easy.
There's a number there.
Right.
We got something. But the other is difficult. It really is. Unless you take people's blood, I guess, on the spot.
Yeah, but even that doesn't measure. I mean, it could measure the amount of THC, but that could be left over from yesterday.
Yeah,
it doesn't. You don't metabolize it as quickly as alcohol.
This was always my argument about the laws that were so draconian against marijuana, because you could smoke a joint in the middle of or beginning of April, and you're still going to test positive at the end of April. But you could have done a lot of cocaine the first week of April, by the last week in it, nobody's going to now. To me, there's a kind of a big difference between those two drugs. We're going to treat them that way. Yeah. The other problem is that it's still what do they call it? Stage 2, Schedule 2, or Schedule 1. It's a Schedule 1 drug right up there with heroin. To me,
it doesn't make any sense.
No.
I mean, honestly, just us talking here, I think alcohol is much more damaging to your health and to society in general than marijuana.
Oh, definitely. Well, have you ever had a chance to look on YouTube and see some of the congressional hearings with the DEA? And I remember them questioning one. He was the head of something. They went down the list. How many heroin deaths in America? He gave a number, and they went all the way to the bottom. And said, how many marijuana deaths in America? And he put his head down, so you almost couldn't hear what he said. And he mumbled something, and we can't hear you. And he put his head up and he said none.
Yeah.
And then they asked him, well, then what are we doing here?
Right. I know.
What is this for?
And that makes the whole cannabis industry really tricky because it's illegal federally still.
Right.
But while, state after state is legaling either medical or recreational or both, you can't bank. You can't use your credit card.
Yes.
You can't. Yes. Investing is difficult. Insurance, just those sort of bureaucratic businessy things are very difficult for a lot of these businesses.
But I think because of the leverage of the people who are looking forward to that money. And so I think those problems will get ironed out a lot faster than any of the others. The banks will figure out how to let these people give them money.
And some are. Yeah, but a lot of people are very cautious. They're being very cautious, and they're right to be until it's changed.
It's a whole new world.
It sure is.
Wow.
So much has changed.
We have a couple of minutes left. What do you want to tell a listening audience right in Nassau County?
What do I want to tell? I think we're in a very politically polarized time. I feel like there's sort of mini civil wars going on, one within the Republican Party, one within the Democratic Party. One thing I'm concerned about is that people are kind of, politics becomes a bit of a soap opera and a bit of a drama, and it becomes a lot of performance art, with this one screaming and this one chanting and all of this. But one thing that I would like people to remember is that government plays a very important function in people's lives, whether it's local government, state, or federal. I mean, bridges have to stay up in the air. Kids have to be learning in school. Sewers have to run smoothly. Government is responsible for some very important functions. And I know that the operational aspects of government are boring.
Right.
But maybe we should make government boring again, because I feel with all of the divisions, you like that, right? I'm going to get a hat.
I like the observation.
Make government
You're
boring
right.
again.
You're
with
right.
all of the drama and the division, I think it's engendering more distrust in general in the whole process.
Listen, personally, I think that this was the intent all along, and it started with Donald Trump, when he stood in Helsinki and undermined every democratic institution that we have, from the FBI to the Department of Defense to the Department of Justice, said, they're all not so good. And I believe Vladimir. That's what he said.
Remember that. I forget. That's right.
And
that was
this is purposeful. These are not just side comments. This is to plant the seed in the psyche of the American people that the things they've trusted for the last 200 years are starting to dissolve, and they're not good anymore. He was saying we were going to have a fixed election before he even started running. That was to plant the idea. And you notice every time he says something, he says it 3 times. And that's a ploy.
And in a way, though, I see with Trump, I think he's a result in some ways. And his success in 2016 was a result of that distrust. That he sort of personified that and spoke to people in a way that they really heard it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think we see the same thing on the left. I think we see that same kind of division and fighting within the party and undermining when government has really important life-saving functions, testing the water, making sure restaurants are serving healthy stuff, whatever it may be.
Sadly, it's contagious.
Yeah.
But listen, you got to promise to come back sometime. The clock on the wall is screaming at me.
Oh, well, we don't want it that. If you invite me, I will come. How's that?
Anytime. My guest today has been former Nassau County Executive Laura Curran, who is now the host of a new podcast and radio show on 770 WABC called Cut to the Chase. So thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Bill.
You got a lot of cool things going on, so we'll be watching. I'm Bill McIntyre. Remember, you can listen to us by searching for this week's Long Island News wherever you listen to podcasts. And we're right here on the radio every Friday at 3 p.m. on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.